Okay, so remember we are talking about benchmarking. Benchmarking is basically a standardization process. Okay, and when you set a benchmark, you compare yourself against these benchmarks in order to see that how you have performed compared to your goals, right? And if you look at benchmarking process, it is basically a more standardized process, but this standardization does not mean that you are looking at the average. So, there is a difference between average and benchmarking. Benchmarking could be treated as average performance if you treat it or bench it mark against the average performance, or even you can move up to higher level of benchmarking, and in that case your standards may be much higher to what the normal standard is. So, many organizations in India have gone for this kind of processes, benchmarking processes. The idea is to see that how we can better benchmark against goals and objectives which is set by the organization. Okay. And these kind of benchmarks actually provide a lot of information related to quality, service that you want to pursue with the customers, related to the products, or when you want to see that how well you have been able to perform compared to your investments in IT, or more specifically in the knowledge management systems. So, there are a lot of actually benefits that you can derive, and you can get a lot of information related to various areas like service quality, satisfaction, what is your product life cycle, what is your cost benefit, how much profit you have made, what are the profit margins, and these kind of things. And you can also manage relationship like customer relationship management. So, we were talking about these points. Now, if you look at benchmarking targets, now you can benchmark against your company within the units. So, various units are going to compete with each other, or you are going to benchmark against your firms, different firms in the similar industry or different industries. Okay. So, you can go for different kind of benchmarking. For example, if you are going to benchmark within the organization, it means that you want to see that how different units are performing, right. Different divisions or units of organizations are performing against the targets that is given to them. The only thing is that you have to look at the internal policy, they should not create any kind of barrier, okay. And then you have to see that what is the superior performance, okay. That is a problem. But when you are using other firms, okay, and you want to measure your performance against your competitors, then there could be some problems or legalities, okay. And then you have to see that you have a third party consultant who is going to see that how well you have benchmarked against your competitors. And here you also see that what are your knowledge strength, what are the knowledge strength of your competitors, and whether you will be able to compete with the help of knowledge assets that you have vis-a-vis your competitors. Now, if you look at average industry benchmarks, okay, these benchmarks could be different. For example, if you look at the attrition rate of IT industry. So, if attrition rate of IT industry, the standard is around 20 to 23%, okay, and you have created benchmark that you want to have a attrition rate of not less than say 15%, sorry, not more than 15%. So, if you have set this benchmark against the industry standard and you are going to work for it, and you have created systems and processes, and then you see that whether you have been able to succeed it or not. So, this is how we are going to compete against the industry standards or benchmarks that is created. Though lot of issues may come up in the process, and that is to be resolved, but you have to see that how well you are able to meet these kind of targets when it comes to industry aggregates or standards of performance. Now, across industries probably you can get lot of insights or information, okay, from both kind of firms where you are competing or where you are not competing, both kind of firms. And then you have to see that where you stand with others, those with whom you are competing or those with whom you are not competing, right. Not necessarily that all companies are going to participate in the process of competition, but you have to see that those who are participating in this, what is the cost and what kind of benefits they are going to arrive out of it. Now, once we have decided what is your benchmarking target, whether it is within your organization, within the industry, with competitors or across industry and competitors, then accordingly you decide what needs to be done. And then when you are going for benchmarking, you need to learn certain things, like when you go for benchmarking, make sure that you are going to benchmark against something that is very important and valuable, and that is critical to you. So, make sure that benchmarking is done against very critical and important activities, okay, which is very valuable, resourceful for the organization. And make sure that you are going to benchmark in those areas where your competitors are not able to reach to you, okay, so that you have a competitive edge. Similarly, you also need to see that they are not going to copy you. So, suppose you have a benchmark for a product, make sure that competitors are not able to offer that product, or not, they are similarly they are also not able to imitate. So, make it hard to substitute, so that competitors are not going to substitute that product. Otherwise, what will happen? If they are going to benchmark against you by competing with you, then probably they will also have the same level playing field. For example, the bank which has come out first as ATMs, you know that automated teller machines, very quick, which disburses money. So, it created a competitive advantage for that bank which first introduced it, okay, but because it was rare, it was very difficult to copy and substitute. But when the technology developed, another bank also came and started competing using this kind of technology, what happened? They created level playing field. So, this kind of benchmark does not work. So, you need to create such a benchmark which is very difficult to copy and substitute by your competitors. Only then you can have a competitive edge in the market. So, these are the some of the lessons that you need to learn. Now, let us see what are the different kind of role models that exist in the industry. Here you will find lot of examples which actually is there regarding benchmarking. Now, in different areas you have different kind of benchmarks. For example, if you look at product development, and the companies there like Netscape is there. For knowledge management integration, Buckman is a pharmaceutical company. Then for knowledge management technology implementation, you have Platinum Technology, which is an IIT company. Software development, you have Microsoft. For innovation, you know, the best known company in the world is 3M, because they have the best benchmark in the world, and they are, you know, that they are top on the innovation index also. Similarly, for in the field of say computers, you have Apples, which have created their own benchmark, and it is very difficult to copy or substitute Apple computers. Say for brand management, you have Disney. For you know that manufacturing, you have Toyota. For logistics, you have Walmart. I mean, you know that Walmart is a company which provides services, goods and services with lowest profit margin. So, they have created such a benchmark which is very difficult to copy and substitute by competitors, otherwise they would be in the losses. Similarly, if you look in mail, they have a lot of companies, right. For franchising, you have McDonald, you know, McDonald franchises are available all over the world now. For quality, you know, Motorola is well known in the world. Similarly, for strategic planning, you know, the General Electric is one such a company which has done very well. Then there are a lot of companies which have competed or tried to compete based on cost. For example, you have Airtron, Southwest Airlines, Apollo. In India, you have a lot of airlines, right, like Indigo, which are trying to compete based on cost and logistics operations and market driven value, and they have been able to very successful. So, you have to see that when you are going to create a benchmark, it is very difficult for your competitors to copy, make a substitute, so that you have a competitive edge over there. And these benchmarkings are standards against which you ultimately compare your performance to see whether you have been able to derive desired results or not. Now, if you look at the benchmarking process, it consists of 5 different stages which are mentioned here. So, first of all, what you do when you go for benchmarking, you have to see that what is benchmark is to be done with, right, what to benchmark, okay, which process, which product, whether you are going for a process benchmark or product benchmark, and what is the scope of this benchmarking. So, you have to decide, right. For example, you are going to offer a new product, so how innovative it is, what are the qualities of the products, okay, or suppose you are going to introduce a new process, okay, production process, and this production process is being benchmarked by you, which is a standard against which others are going to compete. So, you have to decide whether you are going to benchmark a process or product, and then again you decide which process or product, and ultimately you also decide what is the scope of the benchmark. Okay. That is why you want to have this kind of benchmark either for services, processes and products. So, first of all, at the first place you have to decide what to benchmark and what is to be benchmark in terms of processes, services and products, and then you decide why you want to go for it, whether it is valuable to you, whether it is rare, whether it is hard to substitute, and whether competitors will not be able to copy it. So, if you have these questions answered, probably you will be able to clear your first step, and then once you have decided that you are going for either product benchmarking or process or service benchmarking. For example, you want to provide quality service delivery, and you have gone for some kind of innovative systems and processes to deliver a product, right. So, you are going to benchmark it. Now, once you have decided what is to be benchmarked and why you are going to for benchmarking, then the next stage is that you also talk about who is going to be involved in the process, right. So, the idea is that you have a team which is going to be involved in the benchmarking process, right, and you also decide the team within the organization, what would be the resources, what would be the manpower allotted to you, what would be your team which is going to work on this, and also what are the customers who are going to be benefited out of it, whether it is internal customers or external customers. For example, if you are going a service benchmark, it could be the external customers. Suppose you are going to benchmark your HR system, then in that case your customers are going to be within the organization or employees, right. So, they need to be involved in the process. When you are going for benchmarking, get their feedback, decide about how you are going to do it. Okay. So, involvement of customers and their participation is equally important. Similarly, you have a team, you are going to get feedback and discuss it with them, and you also need support and commitment from the top management, because they are going to provide you the necessary budget for the purpose. So, make sure that whatever budget constraints are there, within that you are able to create a benchmark. Okay. So, once this process is complete, you move to the third process, right, and this process actually talks about the targets of the benchmark. Who will be the target of your benchmark, right, and who will be your partners, right. So, if you look at this, you identify, yes, these are the possibilities. You decide about the targets, whether it is within the company, outside the company, it is competitors or somebody else. Okay. So, targets of the benchmark is to be decided, okay, and then see whether you have information about them or not, and whether you will be able to do it with the constraint of resources, time and budget that you have with you. Okay. So, once you have decided about this, the targets, okay, then the next stage is that you are going to see or collect information about this data, then you see you are going to evaluate it and see whether you will be able to do it or not. Okay. So, the next stage is basically, that is the fourth stage, that you are going to collect information about the benchmark. But say let me give an example. For example, you have created a benchmark so far as your logistics and supply chain, and then accordingly you decide that okay, this is the price at which you are going to offer a product, right, or a service, whatever it is, and you want to go for benchmarking it. In the process, you are going to include customers, you have a team, you decide what is to be benchmarked. Now, this the service at which the cost at which you are going to offer a service for a particular product or good is decided by you, and then what you do, you see that who are your competitors, okay, and then try to get information that at what price they are offering the same product, right. In the process, you are going to collect information, analyze the data and say whether you have a competitive edge over them or not, okay, whether the kind of benchmarking that you have done in terms of pricing, whether your competitors are way ahead or down, and accordingly you decide whether you are going to be succeeded or not, and then you get feedback. Basically, you try to get feedback about your system and processes, and then you see whether the kind of benchmarking that you have done is appropriate or not. Okay. If it is appropriate, then what will happen? You get good feedback, and ultimately you say that okay, your benchmarking against a particular target based on certain criteria and parameter is good, and if it is not so, then again you move to third stage. For example, if your feedback is good, then your benchmarking is successful, and if it is not, then you move to this again stage 3. Once you decide about the target, then you repeat all the 3 stages again, because you have not been able to succeed. So, if you are able to succeed, it is all right, you go for benchmarking. If you are not able to succeed, then again you decide about your targets and partners, because for that particular target your benchmarking efforts have not been successful, right. So, benchmarking is a very important parameter to evaluate systems and processes. So, similarly, suppose you have developed a knowledge management system. So, how effective your knowledge management system is? Okay. So, you need to create benchmarks in terms of profits, cost, quality, services, these kind of things, and see whether you have been able to achieve those benchmarks or not, okay, because these are the targets against which you are going to do it internally, right. And once you have done it and you have been successful in achieving those targets, it means your benchmarking efforts have been successful. So, this is one kind of metrics that is used in industry to see whether your KM efforts have been successful or not, right. Now, after benchmarking, there is another way to look at it when you are trying to assess the effectiveness of the KM tools, and that is house of quality approach. This house of quality approach was developed by Hauser and Clausing, and they basically talked about a technique, and they have come out with a technique which is known as quality function deployment. And this quality function deployment basically talks about lot of parameters against which you are going to see whether your KM system is effective and successful using certain parameters. So, what we are going to discuss next is how this quality function deployment works. Okay. So, if you look at this quality function deployment, here what I am going to talk about is the house of quality matrix. And if you look at this matrix on the left side, if you look at it, it talks about the different kind of outcomes that you are looking at. Okay. And then these outcomes include like knowledge creation, right, whether your KM system have been able to evolve to such an extent that people are able to create knowledge. Does this system facilitates knowledge sharing, okay, conversations, okay, have there been creative discussions, okay, whether the KM systems have been able to speed up the solutions of the problems that you have, whether it have been able to improve quality, reduce costs, okay, and whether you will be able to satisfy your customers or not, right. So, these are the parameters against which you are going to measure the effectiveness of the quality management system, right, or knowledge management system. So, these are the outcomes against which you are going to measure the knowledge management system. Now, if you look at this, against this you are having this, okay, how the people are performing, okay, and whether the knowledge related goals of the work group are the work group has been able to achieve this or not. So, suppose if you try to relate this, okay, so what you do, look at the downside, you have benchmark values against which you are going to compete, goals and targets, and then you rank order these issues, which one is more important and which one is less important. For example, out of these outcomes you find that okay, some of these outcomes you have been able to achieve, some of them have not been able to achieve, right. It means first of all you decide about targets and then rank them order. Rank them means that you see that which one is more important, which one is less important, and finally you once you compare the results, okay, from this to this and then say what is your desired results. Accordingly, you can see in some cases the relationship is good, these are the metrics for performance. Okay. So, here you see this is good, here it is not good. Okay. So, the correlation between the sides of the house, if you find that it is positive, it means you have been able to achieve the desired results, and if it is not, if it is negative between the sides of the house, then you can say that the correlation between the outcomes that you have and the desired results that you have achieved, because you are going to measure your performance against these parameters, and then once you have performance and then you compare it and then see whether you have been able to achieve it or not. For example, if you look at knowledge creation means that KM system have been able to devolve to such an extent that people are able to create and innovate new things or not. For example, how many innovative products, processes, systems have been developed in the organization. So, if it is your goals and it is important, you see that what is the outcome and whether it is matching with this or not. Okay. So, you are going to create a specific outcomes in concrete terms to see whether you have been able to achieve it or not. Okay. For example, say cost, you say that if you are going to use this knowledge management system, you are going to reduce cost by certain percentages. Okay. And it is very, very important because cost is a major issue for the organization, right. So, you rank it order and you give it a prior more importance, and then see how much basically the system has been able to deliver in terms of reducing the cost. Okay. And then you are going to compare it, and there is a positive relationship. It means KM system, improving KM system has reduced the cost. It means it is good sign, but if it is not so, it is not a good sign. But for example, even if improving the KM system, investment in KM system has not been able to help you to reduce the cost, then it means that there is the relationship is not positive, right. So, in that case you can say that yes, KM system has not been able to contribute to cost reduction process, right. So, you have to see that you use these parameters, you decide about specifications against these parameters, okay, and then you are going to look at this and see how well you are going to perform against these parameters, right. So, it is very, very important to look at this, how people are performing, okay, how important these matrices are for you. Okay. For example, if you have these outcomes, whether people think that these outcomes are important or not, and whether knowledge related goal of the work group have been able to be achieved or not. If it is not so, then probably they not work. Okay. And then you are going to see the relationship between these two and see whether it is moving in the positive direction or not, okay, or it is in the negative direction. So, this has been a very useful tool, and that is where you are going to employ quality function to see that whether knowledge management system have been able to improve these systems or not. Okay. Now, if you look at a house of quality metrics, basically you have to select those outcomes which can be measured by you, right. It is very, very important in that process, right. For example, whether knowledge sharing has improved or not. Okay. So, you expect that there is going to be 20% improvement in knowledge sharing, or at least 20% knowledge would be shared by the people. Okay. And the improvement in the performance is because at least there is an improvement in knowledge sharing that is up to 20%. Say whether speed of problem solving is there, right, whether this problem solving has improved by 5%. So, you are going to set specific targets against each of the criteria, and then you are going to measure it, okay, and see whether it has been able to meet these criteria or not. For example, improving quality. Suppose you have rejection rates, okay, for a particular products, okay, and you want to reduce it by under 15%, okay, in the next 12 months. So, whether this kind of systems have been able to help you to improve quality and reduce the rejection rate by 15% in the next 12 months or not. Okay. And whether this knowledge sharing has been has helped you to create more collaboration among the employees to share the knowledge, okay, and whether this has resulted in better employee satisfaction or customer satisfaction also. So, when you are going to use quality metrics, the idea is to see that and you have very specific concrete measures against which you are going to look at certain outcomes, and whether knowledge management system has been really able to help you in the process or not, right. Now, we are going to discuss another technique. See, we have talked about benchmarking, we have talked about quality function deployment, okay, and in both the systems you have seen that what we do basically we try to create either a standard and measure our performance against those standards which has already been set earlier, okay. And then there are certain criteria for benchmarking that we try to meet. In quality function deployment, we also identify certain outcomes, and against each parameters we also set certain specifications that is to be met within a given time frame. Okay. And once you go for investing KM and have a KM system and you implement it, you try to see whether these KM systems have been able to help your organizations to meet those specific criteria or specific quantitative criteria you can say for each of the outcomes that you have set, right. Now, we are moving to another part, and this is what we call balanced scorecard. And when I am talking about balanced scorecard, many of you might be familiar about it. It was first developed by Kaplan and Norton, and basically the idea of balanced scorecard was to see that the extent to which you are able to have different kind of measures. Okay. Not only financial measures, but also non-financial measures are included, and similarly you also look at not only your long term objectives, but also short term objectives. So, you have both internal as well as external perspectives. Similarly, you also have long term and short term objectives, and you also have financial and non financial objectives. Okay. Now, if you look at this, this is a typical balance scorecard, and what we will do, we will try to apply this kind of balance scorecard in the context of knowledge management systems, right. So, if you look at this typical balance scorecard, it has 4 perspectives, the 4 type of indicators you can say. One is financial indicators, the other is customer perspective, and then you have business processes, and the fourth is learning and growth perspective. So, you are going to measure your goals, metrics, targets, and initiatives that you are going to take against each of these perspectives. For example, suppose you take financial perspective. So, what is your objective in terms of market share, profit, revenues, return on assets? Okay. So, dividends that you are going to pay. So, these are this is what we call financial perspectives. Okay. So, once you are going to use financial perspectives, you use certain goals and objectives, you decide about certain metrics like what would be your return on investments, return on total assets, okay. And then what is your target. For each of these metrics, you decide about a specific target and what initiatives organization is taking to meet these targets, and ultimately you compare your performance against these targets to see whether financial goals have been met or not. Similarly, you can also go for customer perspective, learning and growth perspective. For example, this is basically related to employees, the extent to which they have been able to develop the competencies. Okay. So, you decide different kind of competencies that is required by the people. Okay. How are going to measure that, how are going to evaluate it, and then ultimately you see whether they have been able to develop those competencies or not, right. So, similarly, you can also look at your internal business processes, right, systems, structures and processes, how efficient they are, okay. And ultimately, since it is related to the customers, it is you must also measure whether customers are satisfied or not. So, the extent to which you talk about say customer services like loyalty, commitment, satisfaction, these kind of issues, whether they have been met or retention. Okay. So, if you look at this typical balance scorecard, it basically talks about 4 different perspectives, and in the middle you see that you have vision and strategy, because these perspectives are being aligned with the vision and strategy of the organization. Okay. And all these perspectives are interrelated, because if you see, if you are taking a financial perspective, this might leads to this also, and if you are going to have a efficient internal processes, this might lead to achievement of certain goals and objectives in terms of finances, right. And if learning and goals objectives are met, probably it would help you to create better internal business processes, right. Similarly, if you have internal business processes, probably it will make people more efficient as well, right, in terms of the competencies. Similarly, if people are having those competencies, they can provide better customer services, right. Okay. So, providing better customer satisfaction also provides some kind of learning experiences to people, which they can use as a feedback to grow and develop themselves. So, you can see that all these perspectives are interrelated with each other, right. Now, when we try to apply this kind of perspective in context of knowledge management, so what we need to do is, for example, if you look at this vision and strategy, what we are going to do or have it, what is your knowledge management vision. Okay. So, first process on this balanced scorecard strategy is that you need to create a consensus that what is your the vision and strategy of knowledge management. Okay. What you actually want to achieve through knowledge management system in your organization, that is to be decided, and what kind of strategy organization has for creating knowledge. Okay. Not only when I am talking about creating knowledge, that is creating different kind of knowledge based system like knowledge development system, sharing system, dissemination system or retrieval system, and then you are going to communicate and link it with this. Okay. Communicate to the people that okay, we want to have this kind of system, and then you see what are the metrics, goals and targets that you have aligned to KM system, and then you also have a learning and feedback system to see how well you are doing. Okay. So, if you look at this KM balance scorecard here, this is the kind of knowledge management balance scorecard which has been used in the context of knowledge management to measure the effectiveness of knowledge management system. So, translate the knowledge management vision. Okay. This is the balance scorecard and see how they are related. Okay. Then you are going to communicate the link, and then you have business planning, and then learning and feedback. Okay. So, see, this is based on the Robert and Kaplan notion of balance scorecard, but there basically we are measuring from various perspectives, and here we are going to measure it in the context of knowledge management system, right. For example, if you are going to translate this into KM system, so whether your investment in KM is resulting in financial investments, whether it is being reflected in the balance sheet or not, you can see here. When it comes to customer capital, okay, whether it is going to increase your customer capital, increase products, new customers through the knowledge management system or not. So, if it is so, then whether organizational capital has increased or not, okay, whether people have got better capabilities, distinct capabilities which other organizations don't have, okay, or whether we are in a position to better manage. Okay. So, whether is your innovation capital is higher or not, or whether your customer relations, customer base and prospects have increased or not. Okay. And here we are talking about process knowledge. Okay. Process knowledge, because what kind of processes have you have created in terms of improved processes, which is going to help you to achieve goals and targets, right. And then human capital perspectives, with whether the strength and the competencies of the people have increased or not, and whether they are going for knowledge sharing or not. So, based, if you look at the knowledge management perspective, when it is applied to what you call KM scorecard, balance scorecard, see how it is happening. Okay. Because you are not going to measure it by book value, but you are going to measure it by the market value. So, the strength of a company or performance of a company is going to be measured by the market value, and if you are using these perspectives, you can very well see that whether you have been able to create different kind of capital, whether it is human capital, organizational capital or customer capital, which is nothing else but a part of what you call intellectual capital, and then ultimately whether this has been able to lead better financial results or not, right. For example, if here I am giving one example of KPMG, and that is how they have done it. Okay. For example, how well they have done so far as client orientation or market orientation or people related things or result oriented things or internal efficiency of increasing the people, and how well they have done so far as professionalism is concerned in terms of developing new technology, development, collaboration, these kind of things. Now, what the KPMG has done, they have tried to work on each of them to improve it, the processes, systems, customer retentions, innovation capital, and see that how well they have been able to create better results through this process. Now, one of the advantages of this kind of process is that it provides intellectual health of your firm. Okay, if you have balanced scorecard for knowledge management, you can see that whether your KM strategy has been effective or not. Okay, and you can also look at different kind of performance drivers and how well you are doing. Okay, and you clearly communicate what actually your knowledge management strategy intends to do with various parameters, and this needs to be communicated to the employees so that they work for it. And you can also link the goals of the individual with the goals of the organization, and then organization goal, that is basically referred to as the strategy. And the important thing is that you have to create a missing link between long term knowledge and competence, and you can, it could be a part of your annual budget, because most of the organizations don't show intellectual capital or human capital or organizational capital in their balance scorecards. Okay. And you can see that how the vision of the organization can be translated into something which is more realistic, which is manageable. Okay. And you can also decide what the specific performance goal that is to be achieved, and you can also integrate your strategy, corporate strategy, with your KM strategy, and see that it is how well it is aligned, right. And you can have very objective measure, because KM systems talks about very specific measures in each of these areas, which can help you to achieve better competitive advantage in different areas, right. And you can also have certain financial measures at the end, because ultimately any KM effort is supposed to improve the company's bottom line, that is the performance of the organization, right. So, these are the different kind of advantage, but it has certain limitations, because if you look at different kind of systems, each one of them are not appropriate in every context, right. For example, a good balanced scorecard is more difficult to develop than a quality function deployment, because for each of the parameters you have to decide about the outcomes, specifications, what exactly you intend to achieve, and how you are going to measure it, right. So, but balanced scorecard is definitely a better measure compared to benchmarking or what you call the quality function deployments. Okay. But apart from that, you have also other measures like Scandia. Scandia is basically a measure of intellectual capital, okay, and they have developed a model which is known as a navigator. Now, if you look at this, basically they are going to measure the market value, and which consists of the intellectual capital and the financial capital, and this intellectual capital consists of human capital, structural capital, customer capital, and organizational capital. Now, this is what is being talked about in even in balanced scorecard. When you are going to apply balanced scorecard, you are basically measuring what? The effectiveness of the human capital, customer capital, and organizational capital. And organizational capital basically is identified into innovation capital and process capital. That is what we have looked into the balanced scorecard. Intellectual capital could be intellectual property of the organization or intangible assets. Similarly, if you look at this, how well you are doing today and tomorrow, you can see if you look at this intellectual capital navigation, you can very well see that whether your intellectual capital is appreciating or depreciating, and then how you can also link it with the financial capital of the organization. Then you are going to use both financial and non-financial measures, and there are a lot of parameters that is used, what you call the metrics. The Scandia actually uses 91 new intellectual capital measures or metrics along with 73 additional measures in 5 focus areas, and basically the idea is to measure intellectual capital base of the organization. Okay. And basically it also recognize the importance of customer capital apart from other capital like human capital, organizational capital, and process capital. Okay. And you have to see that if intellectual capital base is appreciating, then it is adding value to the organization, otherwise not. Okay. Then you have this FSAB model, basically it is an accounting standard which is set by the GAAP, General Accepted Accounting Principle in US. The idea of having this is basically to see that identify certain standards and see how well you are doing. Okay. So, FSAB method has been used, but it is a more accounting measure compared to including non-accounting or non-financial measures in the organizational context. So, when it comes to assessment of KM, we have to see why you want to do it. You create a baseline against which you are going to measure performance. Use both qualitative and quantitative measures. Do not have too many metrics. Similarly, you do not go for such metrics which you cannot control, because if you cannot control, you do not know whether your efforts have brought fruit or not. And then you are going to measure at different levels. Okay. And ultimately, you make sure that those who are involved in this process, they are being also rewarded suitably. And when you are making claims, do not make tall claims, be conservative in your approach. And when you are going to decide about say goals and objectives that is to be achieved, okay, be very conservative and see whether you are able to achieve it. So, these are some of the recommendations for knowledge management assessment. Thank you.